Smoking sexy style! Smoke.
Hello, Smoke here, and we're here today to talk about controls, uh, gamepads, and control schemes specifically. And I want to share my specific setup because it's something a lot of you are curious about, I'm sure, and it's always nice shedding some light into it. And if you saw the thumbnail from this video, you might not be surprised to know that my the controller that I use is actually a Guitar Hero controller, and there are a few specific reasons for that. The first one is that the way the buttons are set up, you can do some moves with more ease than others, and I'm just kidding. I would never use something as crazy as that. My true controller is an Xbox 360 controller, which I have right here. And there's not a particular reason for me to have that specific controller that relates to gameplay. It's just that I used to have an Xbox 360 and then I went over to PC instead of buying a current gen console. And I just kept a few of the controllers I had. And I like it for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that it fits my hands quite well. My hands are kind of big. The DualShock is a bit smaller. And I like the analog, the left analog on top. Though, for DMC, it's not the best, but for most other games, it feels a bit more comfortable. For DMC, it's a bit of a hindrance because of the style switching. It takes some of your options. So yeah. Now, what I think is more interesting than my choice of gamepad is my choice of control bindings, and I'm gonna show you guys my particular setup. And this is it. And it's a bit weird. I know. Oops, excuse me. It's a bit weird, especially this part here. Jump on left bumper. Though this control scheme is really cursed according to everyone that sees it. There's logic to it, and I'm gonna walk you guys through that logic and help you guys set up your own control schemes, even if you don't land on something as outlandish as this. I hope that you will all land on something that's more comfortable to you than the default. So let's go back to the default now that we mentioned it. And I don't like it at all for quite a few reasons actually, and let's talk about them. I think the first reason and the most important one is lock on. Lock on a bumper or the one buttons in the PlayStation, so R1, L1, I think it's really uncomfortable to keep holding down. And lock on is a button that I have pressed down for the vast majority of my gameplay time. Like 99% of my time in combat, I keep holding lock on. And I only let go for very specific instances, like to switch targets like or to do a specific combo. And my hands were actually hurting quite a bit, my right hand specifically, and the back of my right hand, like right at about this region here, because I was putting too much strain on it. So I think what I recommend to everyone that plays this game, especially if they have any discomfort on their hands, is to switch lock onto a trigger. Which trigger, or right or left, it's preference. I go to right because I like having my right hand taking care of lock on. I always hold the controller with my middle finger at all times. And now let's go to the other big anchor point of my control scheme, and this I'm gonna talk quite a bit about. which is jump, and more specifically, how jump and melee attack are positioned. Because in this game, for those who don't know, there's a mechanic called jump canceling, which is it basically allows you to cancel a move by jumping on top of your enemy's head, and it's a very important technique to dominate. And the problem with that is that your thumb has to go from Y to A, and it crosses the controller. So the reason I had it on LB is that I have separate hands taking care of it, so that my thumb isn't as busy. And I'm gonna show what jump canceling looks like in gameplay. So let's go back to my bindings because it's what I'm used to, and then I'll walk through the whole process again. So basically jump canceling. See, I did the revolver here, but if I jump on the enemy during the animation, I cancel it. Oops. And if from there on I'm free to attack, so I can do something like this. And it just allows me to have a lot of freedom in my combos. So this is a basic course of jump canceling. I might do a tutorial, a better tutorial later, because my old tutorials, like I was trying to record it, but my recording software pooped the bed. But back to default. So we have lock on trigger, and now we have jump on left bumper. And I'm going to show alternatives to this, but this is the logic that I went with. And now we have a problem, because change sword conflicts, and devil trigger conflicts. And with change sword, like we can move it to bumper, and then devil trigger we can move it to here. But then our change gun is conflicting with devil trigger that we just rebound. So what I did was actually move change sword and change gun to the face buttons, since my A is now available. So change sword is A, change gun is X. And the reason for this specific pairing is because sword is on the right side of the screen when you change it, so I paired it with A. And I want to keep melee on Y because I'm used to it. There's not a big reason for that. And then X is like to the left of it, so it made sense. And then gun attack, I moved to B because I wanted to use X. I could do something like change sword on B, change gun on A, and keep gun attack on X, because you can have gun attack on the face button because Dante doesn't charge guns. Nero does, so I like placing his gun on the trigger. So now that leaves me without the style action. So what I did, I moved the style action to shoulder button to RB. And then let's go back to what I have. I ended up in this specific setup. And it works really well for me. It may not work very well for you. So now let's go back to default and go over a different way to think about this process. So lock on back to the trigger, same as always. But now the jump and the melee, instead of moving jump to my separate hand, what you can do is switch melee to a button that's close to jump. So that way, instead of having two separate, like jump on a separate hand and then basically just time it, you can slide your thumb from X to A and A to X rather easily, just the tip, or press X with the tip of your thumb and then A with the long part of your thumb. And that becomes a lot easier than going from this motion here, which is like Y to A. It puts a lot of strain on your thumb, especially if you do it like quickly and repeatedly. So this is another solution to the problem of jump canceling being uncomfortable with the default bindings. And this makes fixing the rest of the layout around this much easier, because basically what we can do is just change sword to RB, and we can leave it at that. But then what I would recommend is to invert the trigger and the bumper on the other side as well. So change gun matches change sword from right and left bumper, and double trigger on the left trigger. So that this way, like, you can hold it for Sun Devil trigger, which is like it's very common for you to keep doing stuff. Like you do stuff and then you do double trigger. I'm playing badly because this is not what I normally use. But yeah, I hope this was useful. And now I'm gonna explain my control scheme for Nero and V and walk through the same process. Though I don't play them nearly as much as Dante, you might find some use because there's a little bit different. They're a little bit different between them, especially from Dante. Dante, I think, is has some different pressures on him. So let's go to the main menu and I'll get right back to it. Alright, so we're here at the options menu for all three characters. And let's go over Nero, because Nero is very interesting. Let's go back to default, and then I'll explain how I got to my control scheme. So the problem with default, I have the same problem with lock-on being on the wrong button. So that immediately goes to a trigger. Another very significant problem Nero has is gun attack on the face button, because gun attack is a very useful charge move for Nero, and it's not that the case for Dante. Like, Dante's charge gun shots are really bad. Nero's, though, are really good, so you really want to play while holding down the gun button. So I like moving it to one of the shoulder buttons, and I specifically like moving that to a trigger because it's quite usual to it's quite common to be playing with gun press for a long time. Since we bound lock on to right trigger, that leaves us with right trigger. And now we lost lock on and exceed. So lock on and exceed are kind of not super important. Like exceed is not lock on. Devil bringer, yeah, devil bringer is not super important. Where you place it. Exceed kind of is. I place exceed on X and keep melee attack on Y. And the reason for that is that from the time it takes for me to move my thumb from Y to X is usually around the time of exceed. So I find it really comfortable. So exceed on X, or you can have exceed if you don't like jump on shoulder button. Like you can have exceed on LB, RB, LB, like preference. The big important ones are the jump, the aim, and the gun. So lock on and gun attack to triggers, and then jump either to a shoulder button or you do what I did with Dante. So melee attack on Axe, and then you can bring Exceed to LB. Then Breakaway can be whatever really, and Devilbringer can also be like whatever's left, whatever's comfortable. So something like this is what I would recommend for Nero. If you want to jump on a bumper like I do, let's go back to default and rebind to my scheme. So gun attack on the trigger, jump on LB. Devil Breaker, I like placing it on the shoulder button as well, so you can use charge breakage moves, and you can charge breakage and charge shot at the same time. Devil Bringer, I bring to B for no particular reason other than it was there in Game C4, and it feels nice there, especially with the Spectral Knuckle. Now, Breakaway, I have an A, no particular reason as well, it was there. Lock on the trigger once more, and then Exceed on the Axe for that same reason that I said earlier. Dante, we went over him already. Now V, let's go back to default. V, the only thing you absolutely must do is change Griffin to a trigger, and then once again lock on to a trigger, and then we can just do whatever, like this works. And like jumping is not super important as V, so let's go back to default and map to my control scheme, which is Griffin, Nightmare, jump. This is still B, lock on a trigger. Charge Devil trigger I have on X. No, I have on RB, and auto attack I have on X. So this is my scheme. For the same reasons, the lock on and Griffin, the same reasons Nero. Holding Griffin down is super important as V, and holding Shadow down is important as well. But like it's your default attack button, so like you can just keep both of these pressed, and not like you don't need to use anything else really. And you can use finishing blow, which is the cane, while you press shadow and Y quite easily, so it's not too much of a big deal. And you really don't need to use auto attack while charging shadow. Like that's not really something you would do. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you like the content, follow me, leave a like, and you can follow me on Twitch as well. I stream occasionally there, and you can follow me on Twitter. I'm gonna leave the links in the description. And I hope everyone has a fantastic day and a great week, and see you soon.